Hi everyone, and welcome to the Movie Substance Show. My name is Fariba, and today I'm actually going to be doing my review on the upcoming Steven Spielberg sci-fi alien movie, Disclosure Day. I know I'm very early to this. I actually got to go see a quick screening of it last night, and with the embargo now lifted and the fact that the World Cup is this Thursday, I figured I should actually try to get this review up on time. And so yeah, and I think there's a lot to dissect with this movie because it is about aliens, and it is a Steven Spielberg movie, so let's get right down into it. So I will say something that, and again, I'm going to confess to this. Up until the movie's release, the previews and trailers haven't exactly wowed me. I would say that it's like, when you're watching the trailers, they seem a little bit old school, but they didn't entirely hook me in terms of the visuals. I mean, yeah, it looks pretty cool in terms of what we were seeing, but nothing really stood out that made me seem like, okay, this is a must watch movie, which is kind of insane for me to say because, I mean, this is a Steven Spielberg film, and not just any kind of Steven Spielberg film. This is a sci-fi alien movie, which is right up Steven Spielberg's wheelhouse, and yet somehow I just couldn't really resonate with it. I mean, who knows, maybe it was just because of the fact the trailer itself just didn't work. So that was just my mentality going into this movie up until, of course, recently, just thinking, okay, well, I'm not entirely hyped, but there could still be potential. I mean, just because the trailers didn't really land with me, perhaps the movie will be a lot different. I mean, this is a guy, again, who has a history of making so many alien movies. I mean, we're talking about in Close Encounters, E.T., I think that's the biggest classic right there, and of course, War of the Worlds. So that being the case, I went into the film with at least some optimism, again, cautious optimism, that this movie may still at least land in terms of like the actual product. And I will say this, and I mean, and here's the thing, despite the fact that this movie does have flaws, not gonna lie, this is maybe already perhaps going to be my top 10 movies of the year. That's quite a lot to say. I mean, and I'll break down a little bit, but that's also not to say that this movie is flawless. There are a lot of flaws to it, and this is where I'm gonna actually start off with, which is the fact that the first act of this movie is without a doubt very rough. It's a really rough start. Just the moment you kind of get in, like, you're not even sure what's going on. The way that they're trying to introduce the characters was a little bit clumsy, and I think because of that, I will not lie, I was a little concerned that the first 20 to 25 minutes of the movie was not thoroughly approached, and because of that I was kind of getting a little bit concerned that, okay, this movie may be a little too messy for my liking. Is this going to be a problem? And despite the fact that there was a really messy first act, that thankfully was kind of the only big issue of this movie, because eventually what ends up happening is that once we kind of dive much into the story, start to really unlock what's going on with some of the character development, the plot, the fact that, there's something about aliens, right? I think that's from that point on that things start to get a little bit better. I started to get a little bit more hooked by what was going on in the moment, the situation of it, as well as the fact that, because of the patience, and I think patience is very key in watching this movie, because, as I said, the first act is not the greatest, but you have to be very, very patient in terms of watching this movie, because eventually the patience will pay off in a way that, once we actually get to the conclusion of the film, you do start feeling a lot of chills. I mean, the ending of this film, not gonna lie, will hit you right in the guts. Like, I was feeling so many goosebumps watching just the way that things were ending off, how they're concluding the actual story. But I will say this, I think one of the reasons why this movie worked a lot better than I anticipated is simply for the fact that Emily Blunt's arc, like her character's arc, really delivers. I think that's what really saves a lot of the issues that I felt with the first half of the movie, because with Josh O'Connor's character, you're seeing the fact that there's some kind of situation going on where he has stolen some kind of artifact. He's going this whole whistleblower route against the government, yet there isn't really a whole lot going on. It's a little bit boring. It's a little bit slow. And I think slow is a big thing to say because this is a very slow-paced movie. So just a little bit of fair warning right there. I think because of those issues that were happening right from the beginning, that it just didn't have a lot of personality right from the get-go. But once we actually start shifting to Emily Blunt's arc, like her character's arc, things kind of really liven up. I think with her character, because you can tell there's something very odd about her. She's very eccentric. There's something that really kind of snapped her in a way that it impacts the rest of the movie because of her character. Because of her character's arc, it really saves the rest of this movie in a very big way. And not just only that, but let me just say, Emily Blunt, her performance in this movie will crush you, will absolutely stun you. I mean, the way that she literally played the heck out of her character was absolutely phenomenal. I think this is honestly her best defining performance ever in her career. I think I know that's a really big, those are some really bold words, but I'm not gonna lie, I think this is legitimately her best role yet. And I'm actually even going far as to saying that, a best actress nomination is not out of the question. The fact that she was able to really perform a character like the way that she did, someone who's eccentric, someone who's really lost and confused, yet you can tell how she's really transitioning, how she's reacting to the moment, kind of being the clue, the passage for this connection between humanity and aliens. I think that's what really plays a big part here. I mean, this is a part. I mean, I remember reading a couple of interviews where even kind of the dialect and the gibberish that she had, which we saw the trailer, so this is not a spoiler, but the gibberish part where she's kind of saying some really odd alien talk. I mean, I think she herself actually did that. So just that alone, I think there's a strong consideration for best actress for her. I think she honestly stole the show. She's the best performance of this movie. Without a doubt, I think she really carries the rest of this movie, and I think that's what really kind of saves this movie in a way. And that's not to say that the rest of the performance weren't as great. I will say I think Colin Firth was made the second best. Now, I will say that his character was a little bit too one-dimensional, and although they do discuss a lot of his own issues and why he is the way he is, I wish there could have been a little bit more depth. It was a little bit too one-dimensional, despite ways to kind of try to give him a little bit more of a personality with his character, but that's just where it is. But that being the case, as I said, I think the reason why this movie really works the way it does is simply because of Emily Blunt and her character. She is literally the energy of the movie. I mean, I will say this, and a little bit of a fair warning, because even though it may seem as though that this might be action-packed from the trailers, it's actually not as action-packed as you would think. There are some action, but not a whole lot. I think there are some really good visuals that we do see from those action-packed moments, but this movie is definitely more so kind of like a sci-fi heist thriller in a way. That's the best way to kind of explain it, but do temper your expectations, just because it's not exactly an action-packed film as you would think. Now, that being the case, I think one thing that did surprise me was that there were some really humorous moments. There were some humorous moments where, especially, again, coming from Emily Blunt's character, that I actually did not expect, and I think that, again, helped really brighten up the energy of the movie, because again, it was getting a little bit too boring and slow from the start. But again, as the actual narrative starts to build up more and more, as we get a little bit more of the information that they're trying to present, it does lead up to a very satisfying conclusion or I wouldn't even say satisfying, but a conclusion that would hit you so hard. Like, I mean, I would not lie. Like, I mean, in my theater, everyone was just silent, just because of how chilling the moment was as things were finally kind of starting to uncover. So yeah, I actually did enjoy this movie a lot. Now, that being the case, what I would also kind of give props to with how this film is so different from past Steven Spielberg alien movies is the fact that it does go into the whole idea of this crisis of what would happen if humans knew the truth about aliens and what was really going on. And this becomes actually quite a big conversation throughout the movie with multiple characters, particularly with Eve Housens, Bono's daughter, with her character, because it really goes into whole idea and this discussion about what this would mean in terms of religion and faith. And I do like that they're trying to, or at least I like how Steven Spielberg is trying to communicate with that. I think it was in the right direction, but one of the issues I did have with this, that it wasn't as deep as we would want it to be. So, and I think this comes with the fact that this film itself is already complicated and complex as is. So when you have so much complexity, sometimes it's really hard to really get to the depths of the actual story, trying to present the message. And I think that's kind of some of the more flaws that I saw with this movie, where it's like, yes, it's almost there, but it didn't quite land in terms of the messaging. But even that being the case, the end product does work, the conclusion still ends up working. I wish that the commentary could have been a lot stronger, just because the dialogue was getting there. It just pulled back when it really needed to be. So those are some of my few flaws that I did have, of course, with the narrative. Again, the messaging of what they're trying to present in terms of this alien conversation. But that being the case, I still think that this is a very good movie. Yeah, the first act, as I said, it takes a little bit of time, but even that being the case, majority of the film does work. Now, again, this is a whole movie that really discusses about human empathy, and I think this is kind of a reevaluation of that, and I think because of that, that's what really kind of made me stick around and become very engaged with the movie. But as I said, if you were to, let me just say that there's been quite a theme this year with the fact that we've been getting a lot of emotional alien movies. I mean, we had this, of course, early this year we had the Project Hail Mary movie with Ryan Gosling. If you were to ask me between the two of them, which would be my favorite, I think Project Hail Mary still wins that title. But that doesn't take away the fact that, you know, with Disclosure Day, it's still a very good movie. I think I came out of that theater thinking, oh my god, this actually might be my top 10 movie of the year. It might even be in my top 5, just because we're already halfway through the year. We'll have to see how I feel about it by the time we get to the end of the year to determine whether or not this would still be in my top 10 or even my top 5. But that being the case, I have to say, I think for someone like me who hasn't been particularly wowed by too many Steven Spielberg movies in recent years, like I wasn't the biggest fan of The Fabelmans, I think Ready Player One was maybe one of the few cases where I actually enjoyed some of his more recent movies. West Side Story was alright, but I think this is actually one of my favorites in a long while. I think this is something that he really dissected and knew what he wanted to do, what he wanted to present, and make it still unique and innovative. I don't think we've had something like this where we discuss kind of the human reaction to the whole idea of UFOs and aliens, but I think he does nail it for the most part. As I said, it could have been a lot better in terms of the execution in certain areas, but it still works. So yeah, that's all I have to say about Disclosure Day. I hope that gives you a little bit of an insight as to what to prepare yourself for in terms of watching this movie in theaters, or if you're planning on waiting till streaming, that's completely fine. But that being the case, I want to hear your thoughts, concerns. Are you excited to see this movie? Has been your feeling so far in terms of Steven Spielberg's movies in recent years, as well as just comparing it to Alien, like any other Alien movie? And what are your expectations? Let me know your comments down below, and make sure to like and subscribe.